everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, um,
Good evening, sir.
good evening. There's a lot going on in the news, in the country, and
Yes.
I want to talk about what's behind it all.
Okay. So we
And for
should prepare our viewers that this we are going to go full on political discussion here.
yes, we are.
We we are uh this isn't just large principles based on the virtues. This is we'll focus through the lens of the virtues on what's going on, but this is about what is happening in government right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, so how have you how are you choosing to fortify yourself tonight?
uh, I have prepared I have prepared a concoction of a maple whiskey provided by good, an acquaintance of ours. We got Indiana whiskey. Shout out to Chad Burns. Um, it is a the whiskey is called Breakfast of Degenerates. So it's a maple flavored whiskey. I have added this is my usual cocktail. So there's some cherry. Let me wait a minute. It's smoked cherry maple bitters and a little bit of Fireball and some Fever Tree ginger beer.
Oh, good. Sounds good.
And you, sir.
I have in my Norland glass. This is Irish whiskey. The only thing I've added to it is a wee bit of water. It's Roe and Co. or Roe and Company, ROE. I was first introduced to this. We were in New York City a few months ago, stayed at a lovely little hotel that has an Irish pub with it because the owner of the hotel is Irish. And as we were waiting for our car to take us to the airport, the owner asked us how we enjoyed our stay and said it was delightful. It's a wonderful place. We'll be back. And you have a lovely selection of Irish whiskeys. He said, "Oh, then you've have time for a wee dram, don't you?" And I paused for a second. He said, "That means yes. We'll hold the car." So they held the car, and
Well,
we
did
went.
the driver come in and have one with you?
No, no. And we went to the bar, and he poured this, and I'd never tried it before. And we talked Irish whiskey, and it's Rowan Co. from Dublin.
Okay.
And I found one place in Michigan that has it. I actually picked up a bottle. I was in Chicago and picked up a bottle. It's really a bargain as whiskeys go. It's smooth, it's a little sweet, absolutely delightful,
Hmm.
very drinkable. And oh, here's here, yeah. Here's here's to the Republic.
Up the Republic.
Mm. Oh, that is nice. So this topic first started when you brought up the topic of something called Chesterton's fence
Yes.
from G.K. Chesterton.
Yes. A poet I'm familiar with. And we've encountered the principle of it. The Chesterton's fence is a parable about um, two people walking down a road and they encounter a fence. And it's an old fence and neither of them knows what it's for. So they decide well, one person says, well, who cares? Let's just destroy it, get it out of our way. And the other person points out that we don't know why that fence is there. What's going on with that fence. It didn't just grow out of the ground. Someone put it there. There had to have been a reason why we should not mess with that fence. There could be anything on the other side of it.
Yeah, until you know the reason for it.
Right.
So the parable is to say don't change something just to change it. Understand the reasons for it before you
Right.
change it. And this is a principle I ran into in all kinds of places in business and management and stuff, that you go into a situation, the first thing to do is you have to understand what's going on
Right.
before you try to fix things. Um, we've I've certainly encountered managers who took over and immediately started changing things without understanding why things were done the way they were, what the reasons for them. I'm not opposed to change, but you still have to meet the function that
Right.
the thing was designed to do. Um, Now there was
Right. And
another,
you can choose to modify the fence or
yes, yeah,
yeah,
make it better or change it. Both, we both have made changes in what were longstanding traditions.
hmm
But it reminds me of the story of the woman who always cuts a cuts a roast in half before baking it in her oven, cooking in her
cuts
oven,
the ends off.
cuts the ends off. So why do
Right.
you do that? That's the way my mother did it. Ask her mother. Well, that's the way my mother did it. They finally did go to the grandmother and say, "Why did you do it that way?" Well, my oven was too small for
No,
it. The
the roasted
pan,
pan,
the
the
roasting pan
roasting
was too
pan.
small. Yeah. So, um, so understand the reasons for it before you make a change.
Right.
Um, like recipes, the first time I make a recipe, I follow the recipe. Then to see how it comes out, then I go in and modify it
Sure.
next time. Um, Now
And
there's
now there's another story that occurred to me as we were talking about this.
yes,
That is, and I want to recognize the my belief in my support of this Chesterton's fence thing. Know what you're
yeah,
messing with before you mess with it. However, and just sort of as in fairness, um, there's two that we talked about actually before we started. We also referred to something called Shirkey's principle.
yes. I was just about to mention that. Yep.
Uh, Clay Shirkey um, was quoted in saying that um, institutions tend to protect problems that they are the solution to.
I I I think there's certainly examples of that. That uh, people don't want to put themselves out of a job, out of business.
Sure,
The the although I think the degree to which it's believed to be true is exaggerated. It certainly depends on the institution, and there are institutions dealing with ongoing problems. It's not a one and done kind of solution.
right,
And the best, the people in the institutions, because the people are the institution, really. It's not some anonymous they, it's actual people, are depending on the institution trying to do the right thing and trying to do good work for the
right.
purpose of the institution. But there can be this fence, was put up and this is the way it's done. One of the things I've always hated to hear is because we've always done it that way.
And that's the story that I was thinking of
Yes.
about the chimpanzees and the banana on the ladder.
Oh
Remember
yeah.
this one?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, where they're, and this is an experiment done, um, where the banana was put on top of a ladder in an enclosure full of chimpanzees, and one chimpanzee goes up to get the banana, and he's hit with a blast of water, with a fire hose of water, and chased off the ladder. Eventually, another chimpanzee goes up there, and the same thing happens to him. The same thing happens to him,
Mm.
and then they gradually replace all of the chimpanzees one at a time, but no chimpanzee, even the new ones, are taught not to climb the ladder for the banana because even when they've next successive generations of chimpanzees have never seen the fire hose happen. They just know that you don't go up the ladder for the banana.
Right.
So
And
because that's how we do, that's how we've always done it here.
and I've certainly encountered that in professional situations. That's the way we've always done it. Well, why do we do it that way? Because we've done it
Well,
that way. Well, let's look at the reasons for it. And there are people who are really uncomfortable when you present that to them. I remember a work situation in an agency I was at, big project, went really well. Everybody, were congratulating each other on it. The account executive was congratulating us. And I say, yeah, I look forward to, the postmortem of this.
mhm.
And he said, do you think I did something wrong? What do you think I did wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. No, I just want to take, best practices from this, see how we can do better. And what do you mean do better? It was perfect. There's nothing like, dude, really
Yeah.
threatened by the idea of improvement. Um, so I think that there are enough situations where people say that because that's the way we've always done it, that it gives credence to Shirkey's principle that institutions are just trying to preserve their own mission rather
Right.
than put themselves out
Solving
of business, solve it,
solving the
sort of
problem.
thing.
But
But
like as
there
you
are
said though,
the thing, some
simply
problems are
can't be solved.
right, they're ongoing.
It is a foundation. Public foundations and institutions don't don't exist necessarily to solve problems, but to serve an ongoing need.
Exactly. And that's what Shirkey's principle doesn't necessarily mention. Um, so, but it does enough people believe, maybe through lack of experience with institutions or maybe too much, that because everybody's experienced bureaucracies, right?
Yep.
That it's a problem. So now that takes us to another principle that was first expressed maybe a dozen, 15 years ago more by Zuckerberg as head of Facebook, now Meta.
Hmm.
Um, and he said, move fast, break things. He was talking about software development, where you could when software is being developed, it's not being developed live and deployed live. It's being developed and tested, and you may break things and you can fix them, but you're doing it in a place in a way where, yeah, you're fixing it, you're working on it, you're breaking it, you're fixing it, and then it works, then you deploy it. He wasn't, but that principle is often misapplied now.
Well, it makes sense in sort of any kind of innovation setting
Yeah,
where you're trying to innovate, where you're doing something brand new. It makes sense to move fast and break things
yeah.
because that's
Fail quickly, as they say,
yeah, right.
and then keep going.
You're testing to failure and then redesigning, redeploying. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. And it makes sense in that kind of setting. And this is where we get into the political aspect of what we're talking about. And that's Musk and Doge, stupid name, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which is not a department and is not about efficiency. And they are trying to move fast and break things. But the things they're breaking are institutions and relationships be with other countries and systems and the the idea of that and his his young engineer, neck bearded tech bros going in and fucking around with systems and records and people's personal information and breaking things is not actually, I I am stating, I'm not proposing, I'm not suggesting, I'm flat out stating their purpose is not efficiency. Their purpose is not saving money, eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. If it were, the inspectors general would not have been fired. The
Right.
inspectors general every year have uncovered waste, and that's what they are there for. And getting rid of them and replacing them with some move fast and break things crew is not about fixing things. It's not about fixing anything. It's about breaking the country, breaking the government, breaking the institutions that we have, and replacing it with something else.
Certainly, this is, in my estimation, a or has been since well, within certainly within recent memory, that this has been a kind of conservative, ultra conservative movement of, which is odd, really, when you
Yeah.
think of conservative. The conservative side of things is the what they're trying to conserve. Would
Yeah.
and but but they're actually trying to dismantle government,
Yes.
and it strikes me as a strange thing that, like, Reagan famously said, government is not the solution, government is the problem.
Right.
Uh, and so that's been sort of the rallying cry behind this whole movement of government is just stealing your taxes and you're not getting anything for it. And all they're doing is clogging up the economy with all these regulations. And
If they just freed the job creators to
right.
unleash the power of entrepreneurship,
And that
it,
has never, whenever that has been tried, it has failed.
yes,
It leads to
yes,
monopolies and huge trusts and income inequality and a tanked economy every single time we approach that.
yes.
History
And
is very clear.
the 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 thing is that in this case, the goal of this crew is not the economy for everybody. It's personal enrichment for all of them.
Yeah.
Um, now there are several interconnected players here. They have their own agendas, but they all seem to be moving in the same direction because they all think this will is the thing they all want to do. And I go back to Musk, um, who, first of all, he's not a genius. He inherited money from his parents, his Nazi parents, uh, slave slave run emerald mine, and he's bought companies. He was trying to create a um uh online payment system at the same time that Peter Thiel was trying to create one, and they combined their efforts rather than competing, and the result was PayPal.
Right.
And then Musk got out of that, and he used more money and he bought other things, and he didn't invent Tesla, he bought Tesla and so on. But Thiel um, was the mentor of JD Vance, who's now unfortunately the vice president. He bankrolled Vance's Senate campaign and contributed a lot of money to the Trump campaign. And so now you've got Thiel and Vance and Musk, and they're all tied together.
Yep.
And Vance is a follower of another guy named Curtis Yarvin. And a lot of people haven't heard of him. And Yarvin is, um, for more than 20 years, he's been writing about his philosophical movement of anti-egalitarian, anti-democratic, neo-reactionary movement called the Dark Enlightenment. And he is the one who said Americans need to get over their dictator phobia. The country should be run by a CEO monarch.
Which is bizarre coming from the part or the I don't know, the political wing that made communism a boogeyman,
Right.
right? It's and still does.
Yeah. So
Marxists, oh, you're all Marxists.
that's for public consumption, I think. The
Yeah, right.
the um I've said this before. I think communism and libertarianism are both fantasies that don't work.
Sure, right.
They both result in chaos and dictatorship. There has
Well,
never,
yeah.
so
I mean, I have this theory that there's a these kind of libertarian or communist movements lead to anarchy,
yeah,
which leads historically has actually led to feudalism,
yeah.
feudalism to revolution to another more anarchy, and then
Well,
it
yeah.
consolidates into a some form of a republic.
So
And
I think in this case, when he's talking about CEO monarch, I think that's a kind of feudalism. And we've certainly
yeah,
seen plenty of dystopian science fiction stories where governments are replaced by corporations.
sure.
I'm Rollerball
Yeah,
was
yeah,
that, right?
yep.
And plenty of those stories, but that's what this idiot has in mind.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and he 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 wants to, and he's a philosophical influence on Vance. Um, Trump, meanwhile, in all of this, is uh, um, it's it's questionable whether he actually realizes what's going on, or he's just, hey, do this, sign this, you'll be great, we love
He's
you.
I,
He's
I
being,
absolutely believe he is the useful fool.
yeah, yeah, um,
Like a lot of like in my mind, a lot of Republican politicos are they back this movement because they believe somehow at the end they get to be at the top of it.
right,
There's no other motivation. You're not actually helping people. You're or the people or the populace in general. You see yourself landing at the top of some pile when it all falls apart.
yeah. And that's why so many of them have backtracked. They're just trying to follow who they think is the winner.
Right.
And so many of them had changed their mind, changed their, you know, the party that accused um, people of flip-flopping.
Right. Right.
But you can't shame people for their hypocrisy when they have no shame. And
Right. Yeah. I
yeah,
hypocrisy
um,
is not anathema anymore. It's a strategy.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think what's going on in a look at the where the United States, which was think you can no longer say the president's the leader of the free world, as they used to say after World War II, referring to the communist bloc
Hmm.
as the unfree world, because Trump is, and all these other people are aligning us with Russia and other dictatorships
Iran, North
because
Korea.
North Korea, yeah, because democracy is a failed system, right? That's their premise.
Hmm.
And that's why you'll hear Republicans say, "Well, we're not a democracy, we're a republic." Well, it's a yeah,
We're a democratic republic.
democratic republic, exactly. Um,
And
so
we got tiny elements of socialism, but that's just because we're trying to run a very big and complex
yes,
organism.
democratic socialism, but
Yeah,
not as effectively as countries that actually follow democratic socialism, which is it's democratic socialism. It's what's good for the country, what's good for the people. The the thing that people miss when they say the country should be run like a business, it's like no, because the purpose of a business is
is
com
to
profit, right? The
well,
pur
it's to extract money
right, but
from its customers.
but the purpose of government is not that. And
Right.
government exists without government guaranteeing the courts that guarantee contracts. There is no business guaranteeing safe commerce. There is no transportation of goods guaranteeing the infrastructure of power and water and food. And there's there's so much that actually businesses will not privatize, will not take on those concerns. And the government, so when times are good, government doesn't need to spend as much. But when
Yep.
times are bad, government should invest to reboot the economy. And that has been shown to work. And um that's the opposite of what a lot of conservatives say. But you look at, and it was proven with when the Great Depression, when Hoover sat on his ass and did nothing for years,
Oh,
and things got
because
worse.
he actually said the market will take care of this.
Yes, and it didn't. And FDR was elected, and he put into place. Um, I'm blanking on the name, the economist who who whose ideas he followed, that where the
Oh,
government
I'm
invested
not
in
sure.
things and it restarted things. Um, and that also worked following the crash of 2008, um, but less effectively than it might have because of Republican resistance. It worked really well when Biden did it following the pandemic. It was the quickest, smoothest, best recovery of any industrialized country in the world.
Yep.
And people were still complaining about stuff.
Gas was over $3 a gallon.
Right.
You and I both remember when gas was $5 a gallon.
Yes. In the 70s, I remember in
It
the
was
70s when,
it jumped. It was a huge
yeah,
jump in
huge
price,
jump.
but that had a lot to do with the formation of OPEC
Yes, it
happened at
did.
that time.
But um, part of what's going on also, and we've talked about this before, is the media bubble that people exist in. Because I'll go back to Zuckerberg, the algorithms of social media feed you what you have expressed interest in.
Right.
And the more outraged you are, the more times you click, and the longer you stay on, and the longer you stay looking. And and they aren't feeding you actual news. They're feeding you
They're
reinforcement.
yeah, they're feeding you your bias.
Yes. And we've talked about cognitive biases and selective reasoning. And when I have asked students where do you get your news? For most of them, it's social media.
Yeah.
And their classes I've talked to where they haven't, none of them have ever read a newspaper,
Most,
or at
probably most
least,
have never seen a newspaper.
yeah, and even an online newspaper. And
Oh.
so they asked me, where do you get your news? Said, well, I have about a dozen um, news apps on my phone from, and I show them the media bias chart
Yep.
that shows the spread, and I point out the ones that I regularly check, and
hmm
it's across the spectrum. Say, I will look at the same news story covered by these different ones. It's like, what language are they using to
Right.
describe a thing? How are they reporting it? What are they saying about it? Because that makes a difference. And um, they mostly just looked at me like I was a crazy old man.
Why not just have it spoon fed to you, for gosh
Yeah.
sakes?
Well, and some of them, that's what they wanted from me as an instructor. They want me to tell them what the answer is. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. You have to think.
Right.
You have to think. Well, and I always remember the student said, well, that's not the way we did it in high school. I said,
You ain't in high school no
you're
more.
no. Oh, no, no, no. So I
You
said,
in the
my
real
goal,
world now.
yeah. So, so, oh,
So, yeah. So, the problem, and this may be somewhat tangential, but it's certainly related to the breaking of government as we have known it our most of our lives.
yep,
Um, I think what people are missing, there's two things actually. Um, I think what people are missing is that, and I've read a couple of articles now about how if this is allowed to continue the way it is now, and we are seeing some some obstacles being thrown up, some checks being put in place.
yes.
But
I am why the Democrats didn't understand from day one that their mission was to throw up obstacles, block, delay, and do everything they could. We have all been seen this coming for
oh
months.
yeah,
Why the fuck they didn't see this coming and didn't start immediately and are only now just starting to throw up obstacles? Why some of them actually voted for some of the horrendous cabinet secretaries? And why the fuck they won't write me back? Because I've written, I've called, and I've gotten no response.
well there because there are thousands writing them now,
Yes,
and they can't
exactly.
respond to everybody.
Exactly.
So,
So,
but
yes,
um, where was I going with that? The oh,
you had two things.
two things, and I hadn't finished the first one yet. Um, this leads to r- revolution,
Yeah.
right? And that's because at some point when in what's supposed to be a democracy, if all of the levers of democracy are taken away from you, right, something will happen. Something has to happen. Part of it, this is unlike the French Revolution, where it's essentially got so bad under a monarchy
Yeah.
that people were literally starving so that the rich could feast.
Yeah.
We are actually used to democracy here.
Yes.
We've not had generations of a caste system. Well, a recognizable caste system like we've got, but the we're used to democracy. We're used to having freedoms. We're used to having a First Amendment that actually worked. So it's going to be revolution's going to be a lot quicker coming
Yeah.
than it did in France in the 18th century. The other thing, and what sort of scares me, if I can figure that out, so have they.
Yes.
Which I see, and the steps I see taken to thwart that is the removal of all of the heads of the military and the judge advocates general.
Yeah.
I predict, I hope I'm wrong, but I predict that at the end of 4 years, before there's another election, we will find ourselves in a direct military engagement somewhere. And there will be an emergency, you know,
Yeah.
like is happening in Ukraine. We're not gonna replace the head of government right now while we're in the middle of a war. Well, this government caused the war.
Well,
So
just to be clear, Ukraine didn't. Ukraine was
no, no,
invaded.
no, Ukraine did
So,
not.
okay.
But in our case,
Yes.
right, we are antagonizing both of our neighbors,
Yes.
our best and longest trade partners.
Yes.
We are Trump is inches away from pulling us out of NATO altogether and isolating us.
Yes.
Somewhere, somehow, we are going to find ourselves in a declared war against another power.
Yeah.
And and elections are just going to stop happening.
Yeah.
And that emergency will not go away.
Yeah. It'll be a permanent state of emergency.
Mhm.
And um I'm I hate to say it that I agree with you, but I agree with you. It's um when there's an article I posted before, reposted before, that is an analysis of successful revolutions
Right?
and
Yeah, we've talked about this before.
said the likelihood of a successful revolution is greater when it's peaceful, nonviolent,
Yep.
and at least 3.5% of the population participate. So essentially, a nationwide strike. That would be at least 12 million people,
Right.
taking part. I think it would have to be more, but that's only like a 50% chance of success. I think the from what I've observed of successful overthrows of dictatorial governments, it's when the military refuses to fire on the civilian population
Right.
and joins them. Then there ends up being a military coup, and then unfortunately, often the military coup remains in place and they don't reestablish a democracy, and it just perpetuates and they become what they were replacing. So this is really fucking dark, man.
Yeah. But again, we've we've had a couple of hundred years where things were kind of all right.
Yep.
We, I mean, as citizens, we got away with a lot
Yeah.
compared to other countries before our example.
Yeah.
I mean, the French Revolution happened. Most historians recognize that the French Revolution happened partly because the American Revolution succeeded.
Yes. Uh,
Um,
and there was and it went it was not great in the aftermath. And then they restored a
well,
monarchy, and then they got rid of that. So um yeah.
well, and that's something I point out to people who I am not. And let me be clear, I am not in favor of a violent revolution
No. No.
because I point out to other people who talk about that saying, you look up the terrors at the end of the
Yeah.
French
Yeah.
Revolution. Look that up. Google that, bitch.
Well, and you called me a snob, so I'd probably be considered an aristo.
It's
Uh,
fucking aristos.
yeah. Um, take up knitting,
Yeah,
Defarge.
become a shoemaker.
Is he in
So
heaven or is he in hell? That damned elusive pimpernel. Yeah.
oh, I'm thinking of the duelist, the
Oh, that and the Tale of Two Cities, and I mean, a lot has been written about it, but um, there's actually a tabletop card game called I think it's called Guillotine, and there's a bunch of characters, and there's a guillotine, these character cards, and you get character cards, and it's like an aristocrat, move to the head of the line, and it's worth so many points, and and the idea is to clear your card, get everybody in your hand executed before the others get it. So
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
that's
That's pretty dark too.
yeah. Well, time and distance equals comedy, right?
Yeah, huh? Yeah.
So, Mrs. Lincoln, other than that, how'd you enjoy the theater? Right. So, time and distance. Um, so, um, now we haven't talked about solutions because,
No. Well, here's a my tiny ray of hope.
okay,
We are seeing very we'll see what happens. And this is another concern of mine with the things that have gone on. We're inundated with these the crazy news stories about the kind of bizarre things that our president is saying and the things that he's allowing to happen.
yeah,
Republican districts are and red states are quietly purging voter rolls and redistricting and changing laws to limit access to the vote. All of the ID requirements now. Um, I think that people did not talk enough about how we lost 15 million votes between 2020 and 2024.
yeah, it does not seem plausible to me that 15 million people decided just to stay home.
Yeah, that they were less engaged this
This
time
time,
than they
it
were in.
doesn't it doesn't seem possible to me.
No, no. So
And
that's a huge concern of mine.
yes,
But I see now, we see in other states, even the real possibility of flipping some red seats
yeah,
now. And if we can do sufficient damage to the majority at the midterms,
yes,
we've got a chance to turn things around or
yeah,
put the brakes on it at least.
at least, yeah.
So that's
Um,
my short-term hope is that we can get even a slim majority in the House.
yes. Who would not vote for extraordinary powers or war powers or
Right.
that sort of thing. Um,
Well, and we'll subpoena some people for God's
yes,
sake.
yeah, yeah,
Get some people before committees, televise them, ask them the hard questions.
yeah.
We see a little bit of that, but it doesn't make the news like, you know, uh, well, Canadian tariffs and what the
Yeah.
Canadians are gonna
Well, I think
are gonna retaliate.
one of the other things that's going on is fl what I think it was Bannon, uh, unmade unmade dumpster. Um, he he referred to as flooding the zone, where they just
Right.
all this stuff constantly bombarding the news and people to make them so tired that they just turn it off and they don't want to deal with it because everybody has their lives and they've got things to do and they just don't want to follow it. They don't want to deal with it. Um, times of real social change. There's of course the revolutions that you talked about when things are so dire, but there's also social movements tend to occur when people are peaceful and more prosperous.
Yes.
So, civil rights movement, women's rights movement, and others occurred during a period of prosperity and relative peace. Um, yeah, there was involvement in Vietnam, but
It was far removed. It
far
was far
removed.
enough removed.
Yes, and there were enough. that was problematic enough that that became an issue as well.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that the there are a lot of challenges because as people are concerned about their economic situation, they are less likely to feel that they have the time to take political action. And so the uncertainty about the economy is a tactic.
Yeah. Yeah.
The tariffs are going to make things worse, and that's the point. That's the point. Make things worse so that people are less comfortable and less sure of things. They're less likely to speak up and demand change.
And I'm waiting. I'm absolutely waiting since our president had the audacity, the temerity to suggest that that Ukraine invaded Russia. I'm waiting for the word to come out that Canada and or Mexico have levied these horrible tariffs on us, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that spin. That's because this is part of the tactic of create the crisis and then blame the crisis for the incredibly horrible actions you're about to take.
Yeah. Naomi Klein wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine that describes the use of crises as a means of gaining more political power.
Hmm.
Uh,
We've seen that in the microcosm, and I suspect a lot of people have that one person in your nonprofit organization or your
yeah.
book club or whatever who is manufacturing problems that only they can solve,
Yeah.
or starting a problem and then, hey, but wait, why are we all arguing about this? Here's an idea that would help everybody.
Yeah. And I'm sure we're thinking of the same guy and he was a fucking jerk.
Yeah, but he's a good example we both share, but we've seen it in
Oh,
other
yeah.
places too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
He was
Um,
just so obvious about it that we it
yeah, everybody was agreeing, things were going along, and not to say there was groupthink because there was discussion,
yeah,
people came to a conclusion, and then he would throw
right.
some odd thing in it and to work
We
people up, and then he would try to come in as the hero. What a fucking jerk. Yeah.
so I'm waiting for that spin to start.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll be right there saying, yeah, well, this is a tactic. This is a
Yeah.
stratagem. Um, Wreck something and then offer to fix it for money or, for
Yeah.
some compensation, of course. It's a racket is what it is. It's profiteering. It's
Yeah.
extortion.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
we're seeing more and more organized crime tactics being used as a government program.
well, the comparison of Trump to a mob boss
Hmm.
has been going on for years because the way he talks, the way he tries to maintain plausible deniability, um, um, I'm disappointed in Merrick Garland that he didn't move quicker. Um, he should have, so that things were resolved before the election. But people knew people knew who this guy is. People know who this guy is, and they voted for him anyway. I'm concerned about the 15 million missing
Hmm.
votes that aren't people just decided not to show up. Uh, I did have a lengthy conversation with an acquaintance of ours who, before the election, expressed his intention to vote for Trump um, because he felt it would be things would be better. And I had a lengthy conversation with him about the difference between feeling and thinking. and the difference between opinions and conclusions and sources of data. And any source of information of data I provided him, he discounted, and then he would spout back to me stuff he had heard from non-credible sources. And it was disappointing
Well,
that I was unable to make any dent in his bubble. And mostly I was, why do you think this way? Why do you feel this way? How have you reached this conclusion? And it was so emotionally driven.
oh
There
yeah.
was so little thought behind it, so little cognitive process. It was all emotional. um, um, yeah, and I used every communication technique I could employ to try to make some kind of connection to to understand, and it felt like wasted, not wasted, but it was certainly ineffective. So
Well, there's a who said it's easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they've been fooled.
yeah, I think that's certainly true. Getting somebody to recognize that they've been duped, um, people's ego gets in the way.
Oh
People
yeah,
don't want to admit that they made a mistake, or that they were incorrect about something, especially something that they have then made such a part of their identity. For the Republicans who criticize identity politics, and I have plenty of issues with that as well, they are the most identitarian of
oh
people
yeah,
because they are Trump cultists. And that is their whole identity for some of them. There's already a movement for to suspend the I forget which amendment it was, but the amendment that limited a president to 2 terms, which was put in place because of Franklin Roosevelt, because he was
yeah,
elected for 4 terms. The Republicans put that in place. They talked about trying to um, draft an amendment to counteract that for Reagan,
yeah. I remember that.
and they're talking about it again. Um, and uh,
I've heard it. I've seen it popping up in memes. Like, where are all you Second Amendment people that wanted to fight tyranny?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, where you're the corrupt government that was going to overrun your freedoms. Where the hell are you guys?
yeah.
This
At,
is
s- at some point, we need to talk about the difference between freedom and liberty and the meanings of that. But I think that would be getting into another deep issue. So
yeah.
there's a really interesting book, and it's something we could talk about, by Timothy Snyder, whose previous book on tyranny was really good. I've been reading his book on freedom,
Hmm.
and he talks about the difference between the American concept of freedom from and the rest of the world's uh, um, concept of freedom to.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom
Yep.
from things, freedom to do things. But that's another issue for another day, I think. Um, I do recommend to people that um, download documents, keep them in place, have food and water for stock for a while if you can. Um, the most important thing is community, though.
Yeah.
Find a supportive community of like-minded people who you can rely on and who can rely on you, because I think that's going to be very important. So,
Well, it's certainly important just from we talked about this earlier in the friendship recession episode
yeah,
where isolation is becoming a bigger and bigger problem in the United States in
yeah,
general. Men in particular, it seems, but people in general are becoming isolated and more uh, um, nuclear, their families, they
Oh.
collapse in on just their immediate families.
Yeah. And isolated people are more prone to recruitment into a social supportive organization, no matter its purpose.
Well,
But
because
if it
they're more
has a purpose,
vulnerable, right?
they're more vulnerable.
You're
Yeah,
finding, you're
exactly.
looking for safety,
Yeah.
and you can be made to believe or do terrible things if the alternative is to die
Yep.
or to lose your home or to,
Yeah.
then these are dire warnings, people. We're not saying you need to become a prepper tomorrow or find a bunker where you can hide with, canned food for a year right now.
Yeah. No.
But but you're right. You're absolutely right, Joe. People need to have some kind of community.
Yes. I mean, it was certainly just growing up in northern Indiana where we kept a shovel inside the house because every year, at least once, we had to dig ourselves out of snow that had drifted over the roof line. Um, we always had a supply of food and water in the house
Hmm.
because you weren't sure if you were going to go without, you lose power. You weren't sure if, you're going to be able to get out to the stores. You weren't. So we always had that was always just a given that wasn't considered prepping. That was considered growing up in the snow belt.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
right, right,
and the government recommends, at least I think it's a very minimal thing to have 3 days of food and water for everybody. I would go further than that. And I'm not talking full on, preppers that have, I'm not talking like, what was the movie with Brendan Fraser where he was in a bunker
oh, yeah,
for
Encino Man, or
decades? No, that
oh,
was
that
he
was
was
no, he was a caveman. Yeah,
caveman, yeah. But I'm not talking that sort of thing. But um, yeah, people should be prepared. And obviously, given the things, depending on where you live, the like fires in LA, people had to get out like right
yeah,
now. Well, that can happen for any number of things. I mean, I think that's one thing about Michigan, knock on wood, is, tornadoes usually have a little bit of a warning, snowstorms, weather stuff. Of
oh,
course, if they eliminate NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and eliminate that, of course, every industry, and certainly agriculture depends on that. But that gives us advance warning of things. But we're the infrastructure here is pretty good. But still, we don't have no idea what will happen with supply chains. Um,
right.
the United States imports 95% of the potash used in agriculture.
And fertilizer from Canada.
Yeah, it goes into fertilizer. And a, a tariff on that is going to huge,
Tara, if they're willing to sell it to us.
yeah, because
I
they don't
mean,
have to. Yeah,
no, there was a Republican senator asked for a dispensation from the Trump administration for potash in particular.
yeah,
And I don't know what came of that, but with the new, the almost anybody who's likely to be elected as prime minister in Canada, they've all come out with scathing rebukes of the American
yeah,
government and what
yeah.
they are willing to do if these tariffs go through. Now they've been paused again, I understand, but what would the premier?
What are
What's
they
his name?
saying? Elbows up is
Yeah, elbows up.
yeah, Gordie Howe would, if your gloves off, elbows up.
It was a the premier. I forget Richard. I think it's Richard something. Came out and said that you know What if we just shut your power off for 1.5 million people?
Yeah.
That they control a lot of the New England state's power grid.
No.
It all comes from their hydro, and we buy it from them. But that means they have to be willing to sell it. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about with a boots on the ground armed response to something.
Yeah.
If you don't think that if Canada shut off the power to, a quarter of the country, that Trump wouldn't declare a martial situation and
Invade
try and move
Canada.
into Canada.
I do I think a lot will be written about how the hell we got here and got to this place. Um
And I think if
if
literary survives, I think
if
if literary survives, we will have students reading about the worst decade in American history.
yeah. Yeah. Ugh. I posted that there are the highest mark of infamy and bringing it back to the virtues, right? Truth and justice and renown is gained through the exercise of the virtues, and infamy is earned by rejection of the virtues.
Hmm.
And the highest mark of infamy is when a person's name becomes synonymous with their bad act.
Yeah.
So Quisling,
Hmm.
a Quisling is a traitor named after Vidkun Quisling, who was the president of Norway during the Nazi occupation and was a Nazi collaborator. He was executed.
Yep.
And then Chamberlain, Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of England, is synonymous with appeasement because he signed an agreement with Hitler for peace in our time, as he said, saying that Britain would take no action against or was recognizing Germany's claim to the Sudetenland, which was an area of Czechoslovakia.
Right.
Um, and somebody asked me if, it was plausible that he was actually trying to buy time for England to ramp up so it could better defend itself. I said, I have never seen any evidence of that.
Yeah.
Um,
I've never heard that put forward either.
um,
That's
but I think,
apologist
yeah,
talking.
I think Trump's name will become synonymous with the, it'll go down with like
Hoover,
Hoover at least, maybe
McCarthy,
yeah, and um
Taft,
let's uh Johnson, not
Andrew Johnson.
Lyndon, Andrew, um and during the Revolutionary War, the who was the traitor?
Jefferson Davis.
No, that's
Oh,
that's the Civil War, Revolutionary War. Uh,
Benedict Arnold.
Benedict Arnold.
Oh, like
Yeah.
the most famous traitor in the
Traitor.
history of the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So we will post this and maybe put targets on our backs.
Ah,
Um, and yeah,
good luck finding me.
yeah,
I got guns too.
yeah, yeah, yep. So, I think we've about covered that.
Oh yeah.
So, um,
So some apologies that mainly what we've done here is just vent our frustrations with what's going
yes.
on. We didn't offer any real solutions. We've given dire warnings.
Well,
Um,
I will say, write and call your senators and congressperson and do so every week and keep doing so to get, no matter what party they are, to to express this to them. Writing their contact form that's, of some effect. Calling is generally considered more effective, but you have to be persistent because I haven't been able to always get through
No,
because their messaging systems just
right.
can't handle it. But keep up the pressure. The more it keeps bouncing, the more it keeps filling up their voicemail. And every time you call, express a single concern, one or two. Single concern is best because that's how they put it down. Don't just rant like we're doing, but express your concern about a particular thing and keep up the pressure. And then, if your elected representatives have local meetings, go to them and speak your minds and do so um, with facts at your disposal. Do so calmly, but energetically.
Be 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 courteous but adamant.
Yes, exactly. And I won't say necessarily I have to like this, but please comment and share and suggest what you'd like us to talk about. We
Yeah, if
will,
you're tired of hearing us talk about politics, suggest something else.
yeah, but that is the most pressing thing right now. So,
If yeah, it is it yeah, I can hardly think of anything else that's going on without this having some effect on it,
yeah, exactly.
being part of what's going on somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, and if there's a if you see some sort of local protest happening and you agree, consider going.
Yeah,
I went to a couple of Black Lives Matter
yeah,
marches a
you
couple
can
summers ago.
you can look up Indivisible and they post links to protests and events in your areas. Go to your senators and congresspeople and see when and where and if they're having a town hall. It's might become increasingly less likely because of the pushback that they're all getting. Um, but keep the pressure on.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
make it uncomfortable.
yeah.
That's the thing to do. So, and
So,
so
yeah, until next time, be thou
a good night
and true.